Hi everyone, my name is Nathan Barrett. I'm here with Shazan on behalf of the Society for AI Literacy, and we have the privilege today to be able to interview Katrina Bryant. So, Miss Bryant, would you like to maybe introduce yourself to the viewers? Tell us a little bit about what you do.
Yeah, for sure. So thank you for having me on this event here. My name is Katrina Bryant. I am with Microsoft as a Copilot and Productivity Specialist, and I help our customers of varying sizes across industries of all types across Canada, the US, and sometimes other places around the world. Just better learn how to use AI and, in order to hopefully make their lives a little easier, save a bit of time, and reclaim that for things that they actually want to spend their time on.
That's very nice. So we're excited to get to know you and a little bit more about your role and your viewpoints on some of these AI issues that are very prevalent these days. And again, thank you so much for giving us your time and kind of helping us with your insight. So could you just quickly share us a little bit more about your background and kind of how you um, reached a career in AI?
I have to admit, it's kind of sort of a bit of a, fell into it, kind of stumbled into it, so to speak. I started off in what is called Microsoft Exchange, which is all the server infrastructure that runs all your email behind the scenes. Communication and productivity was sort of something I started off with from a technical perspective. And just slowly over time, my technology ADHD just kind of like took me into varying other areas of things like unified communications with using Teams and security compliance, governance, and other sorts of, performance optimization. And then, Copilot sort of burst through the wall like the Kool-Aid man and said, now this is part of your wheelhouse as well. So now you've got to learn and help other people sort of, get ahead of things as well. So it's transitioned a bit from less to do with sort of the deep technical components of working with AI and really more to do with the sort of human side of adopting AI and kind of figuring out how best our customers can potentially use it. Because I mean, if you give someone a toolbox and they don't know how to use the tools, they're going to say thank you, and then they might not ever really use anything in that toolbox because it's a new technology. People don't really have like a sort of previous experience most of the time using generative AI, right? It's like handing someone a mobile phone for the first time and telling them, go ahead, here you go, have fun. And they don't really know how to use it.
Very interesting. You've talked a bit about how Microsoft Copilot is capable of enhancing productivity
Mhm.
and helping people spend more time on the things they want to do. How exactly does it do that in a professional or an educational setting?
So most of the time, we're talking about sort of how Copilot can help you, with a lot of the admin tasks, a lot of the busy work and things that maybe you spend a lot of time on, and maybe you can spend less time. So, for example, perhaps maybe you have to pull together a PowerPoint presentation in order to, present something to a client or to your colleagues or to your boss. And rather than spending a whole day on doing that, you can have Copilot sort of create that first draft for you because really when I open up PowerPoint or Word or anything else and I'm faced with a literal blank page, my brain immediately starts thinking, oh my God, how long is this going to take? How do I get started? How am I going to structure it? What do I include? What do I exclude? And so Copilot really sort of helps me break down that task initiation barrier so that I can also kind of figure out how I want to get started and how I want to structure it and get the ball rolling so that Copilot, when it creates that presentation for me, kind of sort of helps me get started, get going, and be able to, instead of spending 6 or 8 hours on it, I only spend 2 or 3 or 4 hours. So that I can take that time and, maybe work on that side project I've been really trying to do, to get a promotion, or this other initiative that I've been trying to work on to help, improve efficiency for myself or my colleagues or my business or whoever it is, right? So I can reinvest that time doing things that maybe I find more valuable than just admin, busy work.
For sure, yeah. And I actually want to tie what you said back to something that we actually teach people, a lot of young students in our presentations to junior high schools.
Hmm.
Something that we actually teach them is the same thing about task initiation and how AI has such a high potential in terms of initiating tasks. So, like, for myself personally, with my education, the hardest part of a lot of tasks is like getting started for me, right?
Yes.
Planning and stuff. And AI holds that potential to really simplify. Even just by creating like a plan of how you can go about starting that task or creating a schedule for how you can achieve that work. So we definitely seen how it definitely increases your workflow and can increase your productivity and your output. But I kind of wanted to ask you, what successes or challenges in particular have you seen or encountered while you're working with AI? Not just about productivity, but just in general.
Yeah. I mean, some of the challenges for sure is, I mean, the fact that AI isn't going to replace anything 100%. I mean, AI is not going to replace jobs. It's not going to replace workflows and processes. It's going to help you get there much faster, but it's not going to 100% replace everything. I mean, sure, there's going to be some roles that are going to be sort of ruled out in a way because they're going to be able to be automated, but that is just sort of a natural technological evolution that we've experienced many times. Computers becoming a thing, the internet becoming a thing. I mean, even the industrial revolution, and industrialization and manufacturing of en masse of products and things like that com- destroyed entire industries, but created so many more. So really, when it comes to sort of those components, some of the challenges are a lot of the fear of the fact that in a way, some people want to sort of withhold information so that people don't know how AI could replace them, or rather than continue to evolve and develop and learn new skills, people are going to do their best to try and keep AI out so that they can keep their job because we've always done it this way, which is a saying that is sort of killer of innovation. But from a technical perspective, I'm sure you've probably all seen images that have been generated by AI that look a little too like uncanny valley, or like there's six fingers, or and someone's hand is around over here, but then when you see it poke out from something, it's down here. So there's definitely challenges around there. And other areas, such as it might not always get it right. So really, in our case, our product is called Copilot. So it's not replacing anything. You are the pilot, it is your co-pilot. So, it's not autopilot. You're not going to just take what it gives you. You're not going to just take the first result you get in Google, copy paste that, and send it off to your customer or your boss because it's your name that's attached to it, not Copilot's. So it's not perfect. And I don't think any technology is, but it certainly has some challenges that I think some people also kind of need to, you know, reduce their expectations, but also realize it's kind of more of a tool to help rather than a tool to replace.
That's a great point because I think one of the biggest fears, beliefs people have about AI is it's going to replace jobs, it's going to lead to, shortages and all these sorts of things. But you made a very interesting point, which I've never heard before, is that you actually believe it's in a way it's going to create jobs and professions.
Yeah.
What sort of um, specific examples do you that come to mind when you say something like that?
Well, I mean, technically my job. I
Yeah, I was
mean,
gonna, yeah,
I never really did anything like this before. I mean, sure, if someone needed help learning how to use Outlook, I'd help them, but it's more of a, click here to do this, do this, do this, rather than how do you talk to Outlook to get it to do what you want it to do. So, sort of productivity coaching or things like that is an area. But from a technology perspective, um, actually one of the panelists from the event where we met also shared that they're using it in order to help accelerate the prototyping process. So rather than manually sort of figuring out which elements would potentially produce a better, stronger plastic or metal or something like that, they can use AI and machine learning models to help them sort of figure out on a faster scale or a larger scale what is going to be a better solution versus someone sort of manually going through and doing that analysis themselves. So it's reducing reducing the timelines for a lot of those types of tasks. And so there's going to be like AI engineers and productivity engineers that are going to be you know better at using these tools in order to get similar or same outputs of somebody who might have been doing it manually for 30, 40 years. So of course, also developing new LLMs, like DeepSeek, which is the one that everyone's talking about. There's all kinds of ways where we can make AI, better, faster, stronger. So I feel like it's a lot of the unknown, though. We don't really know what we don't know. Like, the uncertainty, which is definitely what a lot of people feel, is there. But I don't know if we totally really know. And I don't know if I'm imaginative enough. And this is honestly a place where I would ask Copilot what would be, sort of the kinds of careers and industries that might be created as the prevalence of AI spreads and grows.
For sure, yeah, and that's definitely very insightful points that you made, especially with the wide variety of uses that AI has. So within your work as a productivity coach for businesses and clients who are trying to use AI, what AI powered tools or features of Copilot have you seen have had the most impact on users?
So, usually when we look at the adoption metrics, the top two use cases are summarizing emails, because how many times do you get added to an email thread 20 replies deep and someone says, "Hey, so and so can answer this for you. You're so and so." And now you have to figure out what's going on, what's the context, what am I being asked for? And so that you can start to formulate that response. Or oftentimes you're running from meeting to meeting to meeting to meeting. You hardly have any time to even eat in a day, and now you're still required to sort of have the same level of output as if you had a day that wasn't just absolutely filled with meetings. So summarizing emails is a huge one, whether it's on your laptops or whether it's on your phone. Number two is usually what we call Copilot Chat, which is the interface that feels and looks most like a chatbot to people. So, they can have a conversation with it, and they can ask it questions and it will respond based on what the person's looking for. So if they're looking to find information or summarize a meeting that was recorded or summarize a document or list all the Teams chats that I had with so and so over the past 7 days to help me recap my week in preparation for our weekly one-on-one. So there's a lot of different ways where you would potentially normally aggregate information from multiple sources. You can instead go to Copilot Chat in order to potentially ask it so it can do all of that searching for you instead. So those are usually the top two use cases. It's summarizing emails and using the Copilot Chat feature to ask it questions and get information and analysis.
Very interesting. Now, in your experience with working just in AI in general, what sort of successes or challenges maybe do you reminisce on when you just look back at your career working with this very powerful tool?
I really wish I had it in university.
Mm,
I mean, I know that's potentially a controversial thing to say since we're currently in a university, but honestly, it helps me be more creative because, like you said earlier, right? Like it just kind of helps you, even if you don't necessarily use everything that it responds to you with or creates for you. It just gets the sort of gets your brain thinking about things, right? It gets the ball rolling. It's that task initiation component that's a really struggle for me. So the literal blank page wasn't just a thing. That's literally what I experienced. And so task initiation is a big one for me. And bringing in data and information from multiple sources and having it aggregate and analyze it for me rather than me having to, create a spreadsheet that brings in all this data and have to figure out how I'm going to build that spreadsheet or how I'm going to display that information or how basically I'm going to get that data to tell the story. So I can have Copilot instead bring that information in to tell the story for me, or at least kind of, again, give me ideas of how I might, architect something to tell the story. So it's really the task initiation, it's the understanding and analysis, and complex data sets and areas like that. So and also research. I mean, I get off the wall questions from customers all the time, whether they're end users or IT, and some of them just don't have answers yet, and others I'm able to find information based on sources I didn't even know I had access to internally. So it's definitely an easier way to help me understand you know I don't know what I don't know, so Copilot can help me hopefully fill in some of those gaps by asking it those questions.
For sure. So those are definitely some very interesting points, and especially with task initiation and the congregation of data from a variety of sources, a lot of these ethical considerations kind of come up as to whether or not it's fair to use AI as a way to, not just boost your productivity, but in the education space, concerns with things like plagiarism and
Mhm.
using AI as a replacement to a person's learning, or in the workplace, using it as a replacement to your work. So, from your experience, what kind of ethical considerations do you think should be prioritized when using AI tools or designing them for educational use or workplace use?
To be honest, a lot of the same sorts of concerns are present in the private sector as well. We have customers often asking, like, how do I know if this was generated by Copilot? I want to know. And it's like, well, there if it was so easy, then, all those, especially in the education space, all those tools that teachers use in order to try and figure out if something is AI generated, those industries would go out of business because we'd be able to just make it so easy to tell that it's AI. So in a way, not being able to tell is technically a testament to, sort of how good it's getting and how natural it's getting as well. Because if you could tell, and, probably 5, 10 years ago you could, then it's not doing a very good job. So, when it comes to the plagiarism concerns, when I was in university, obviously, of course, we didn't have AI. I won't tell you when that was, but at the same time, in a way, my university was a bit controversial in that all my exams were all open book, open internet, because their philosophy was, if your boss asks you to do something, they're not going to say, I want you to do this and this and this, but I want you to do it from memory. They're going to say, I want this with this information done by this date. Let me know if you have questions. They don't care if you go to Google. They don't care if you go to Bing. They don't care if you go to Copilot or ChatGPT or DeepSeek. Well, maybe they might care about some of those, but it's a matter of what tools do you have in your toolbox to help you get the job done. And ultimately, your name is on that thing, right? You're not, if you're just copy pasting things you get out of ChatGPT and submitting them to your professor or your boss, and you didn't even look at it, well, then that's a different issue altogether, right? Again, you're not going to go to Google and just type in a search and take the first result and blindly copy paste that off to whoever it is that you're trying to send that to. There's always the human element of that. So it's similar to just copy pasting things from Wikipedia. I had teachers that would ban Wikipedia sources. So what do people do? They use Wikipedia to learn the information, and then they scroll down to the bottom to find the reference where that information came from. So they use the reference in Wikipedia in order to, cite in their paper or whatever the case is. You're technically kind of sort of using Wikipedia, but you're using the sources that populated Wikipedia. So it's like chicken and the egg, tools in your toolbox. I mean, I was also told as a kid, well, you're not going to have a calculator in your pocket all the time. So you got to learn all these different complex mathematical equations. Well, surprise, I have a calculator in my pocket all the time now. It's called my phone. So, it's interesting to see how all these things evolve, and it's natural for people to be concerned about new technologies and change is scary. So, I think we're going to continue to see these things evolve, and it's going to eventually sort of become as ubiquitous as just Googling things or using Wikipedia, and people aren't necessarily going to think about it so much anymore.
Staying on, ethical considerations that have to be taken into account when using tools, when using AI-based tools. I don't know if this is beyond the scope of your role with Microsoft, but how does it seek to ensure that the AI-generated content users receive um, is accurate, reliable, and unbiased?
So in our product, and to be fair, many other AI products, there's, sort of responsible AI controls. And so these kinds of controls are things like if you ask Copilot to give you the recipe for napalm, it's going to say, I'm sorry, I can't chat about that. Let's talk about something else. Because that would be considered harmful content. Now, when it comes to the whole ethical consideration, there's also, scenarios where, if I ask it, how much does, just Shazam make? And even if if I have access to that data, it might tell me, but it's also going to say, I'm sorry, I can't answer that because again, that's personal information. What's his address or, what's your date of birth? If I have access to that information, then it might not necessarily give me the answer depending on different criteria and conditions because of, personal information considerations. If you ask it to generate an image of a certain celebrity doing something, whether it's, ethical or not, maybe it's just a celebrity in a field of kittens. It's not necessarily going to do that because again, the celebrity's likeness is personal information. So there's a lot of those kinds of controls that are in there to help ensure that it stays as fair and responsible and unbiased as possible. But at the same time, there are certain industries and certain use cases where that is something that they potentially do need to do. So, for example, with police, if they need to do investigations on particularly heinous charges, they can't necessarily use tools like ours right now because the responsible AI controls are going to say, I'm sorry, I can't talk about homicide. And so, that's sort of a challenge that we're encountering, which is sort of limiting in those types of scenarios where that is something you need to do, like military applications, judicial applications, medical applications relating to usage or interpretation or analyses of medical data. So, it's kind of like a, six of one, half dozen of the other, where the responsible AI controls are helpful for, the sort of mass consumption, but in some cases, you kind of sort of need to skirt some of those responsible AI controls, and you need the bias or you need the unethical content or harmful content because that's part of what you need to use it for. So, um, I mean, on a whole, though, it's a bit of a challenge because there's lots of other AIs out there that don't have those types of controls. And so you can go to those and you can have them create videos or images of celebrities doing all kinds of things. I've seen some hilarious things come out of, Twitter slash X's AI, like I saw like a video of like a sort of like a haute couture fashion show of, various world leaders in outfits that kind of sort of, was similar to the sort of their country, I guess, so to speak, and what was traditional for them. And like it was great. I thought it was awesome. But I can also assure you there's probably going to be people using those sort of less, or more open AIs for more nefarious reasons, which I'm sure we've all seen things. But um, this is where sort of, there's like we are just one of many different solutions. Of course, we want to be the best one, but this is where other areas with governance and policies and things like that across the globe are also going to help in shaping and ensuring that AI remains fair, ethical, and responsible, where possible.
For sure, yeah. So definitely a great point. I think that the balance, like on the scale between responsible controls and the bias that might exist or come out of it, is definitely something that needs to be considered. Where that balance is, I think it might vary from person to person, but bias is always going to exist, and we think that it's definitely crucial to like address that. And we can clearly see that Microsoft has done that in their Copilot tool. But I wanted to go back to how the kind of the fear that you brought up with the integration of AI in your previous answer, kind of with the ethical considerations and how for example, people didn't say that you would have a phone in your or a calculator in your pocket, and now we have phones. Something that we've seen in a lot of schools that we presented at, like junior high schools, they've actually blocked like ChatGPT and other AI resources from their Wi-Fi network. Um, you know, and with that, definitely comes a limitation to the productivity that students can kind of achieve,
Hmm.
because those tools kind of maximize that. So I wanted to hear your opinion on how you think AI can support professionals or even students in becoming more effective in their work.
I think it's, if you want to learn about something, sure, you can Google it or you can ask an AI tool in order to explain it like I'm five, right? Like it's one thing, like you want to learn how quantum physics work. But if you try to read papers and documentation about quantum physics work, I mean, I have a friend who's a scientist at Waterloo University, and she tries to tell me, and it's just like, I swear I'm smart. But it's just so abstract for me. I can't quite understand it, but I can ask AI tools and I can have them kind of, you know, dumb it down for me so I can better understand. From a learning perspective, it has made it way easier to sort of ramp up on different topics. But from a teaching perspective, an education perspective, it makes it easier for you to potentially help you come up with ideas for lesson plans or activities, or help you sort of build a syllabus, or help you build out assignments and other types of things as well. So again, it's still a bit of there's a lot of the fear that's still also driven behind it, and I understand as well there's also a lot of those conversations around ethics and responsible use. But in the case of students trying to use AI tools on their phone but the school Wi-Fi blocks it, people are just going to turn off Wi-Fi. So that's the other part of it too, which is the more you try to, like, humans are fickle and interesting. The more you try to tell someone not to do something, the more they're going to want to do it. So if you say, don't use AI, what are you going to do? You're going to go home and you're going to be like, what's AI? Wow, this is really cool. And now, in a way, they have opened up a new avenue for you and a new interest and a new passion because they told you not to do something. And you see this with things like, for example, European culture, alcohol consumption is very open and it's not very taboo. And so you see, like, I remember growing up, if I wanted to try a bit of wine, yeah, sure, here you go. Here's a few sips in a glass. Now, I mean, that might be controversial because in North America, the legal drinking age, or at least in Alberta, is 18. But it also meant that I didn't feel like I had to go out and go crazy when I became legal. And, I didn't really have interest in alcohol because it wasn't taboo or foreign or prevented. Like, I wasn't told no for that kind of stuff. It was more about the responsibility around it and understanding. So, in the case of organizations, some organizations, they try to block all generative AI tools. So what do people do? Whip out their phones and they use whatever they can find. So that means your personal data, your sensitive company confidential information is now being used to train other LLMs because when you use a free service, what's the product? You, your data, right? So in those cases, by virtue of blocking generative AI tools, you've now created more of a security concern rather than determining, what the approved AI tools are, what the responsible use is, and all of those elements, and sort of funneling people into those places instead of, again, trying to prevent them from sharing information. I mean, this happens with healthcare all the time where they say you're not allowed to share patient data over Teams. What do doctors do? They use WhatsApp or they use Signal or they use SMS. If you prevent people from doing things, they're going to find other ways to do it. And it just might make your security chief executive try to tear their hair out, trying to chase it down. So, again, it's kind of like a six of one, half dozen the other of do you completely block it and potentially create interest? Or do you figure out what the best solution is, sit down and have a think, build a council, build a strategy on how you're going to encourage people to use it responsibly, ethically, help them understand what is responsible use, what is ethical use, how do you use AI to learn versus how do you use AI to cheat so you don't have to spend so much time doing your homework. So where are those lines, right?
Great ideas. We've talked a lot about what Microsoft Copilot is currently capable of. Let's speak now to the future. What do you think the next big advancement for AI tools like Copilot is? What do you think that's going to look like?
Um, our roadmap is massive. Our product group has very lofty aspirations for what they have shared with us, even internally or publicly. Um, one of the big major features that is going to be released in the next couple months, for example, is more automation. So it'll obviously, of course, you can still ask AI questions, do your analyses, summarization, etc. But you'll be able to have Copilot autonomously perform actions either on a regular schedule or when an email with this subject line comes into my inbox, then execute this Power Automate workflow. So it's like having an assistant, an executive assistant that will just sort of sit there and wait for sort of triggers in order to perform actions. Or, there are other actions would be things like you need to gather information on a regular basis from these six people. So you can set up a workflow so that it will automatically go out and send a message to those people. They enter text in the text box to provide it to Copilot. And then rather than Copilot just giving you all the text that they gave, it actually turns it into like a coherent paragraph or a table or whatever the case is, how you tell it how you want it to aggregate or summarize or present that data to you so you don't have to do as much of that manual effort. This is kind of something we've had in IT for a long time with scripting. I mean, I don't know how many times working in like operations, I would spend hours upon hours automating something with PowerShell scripts versus spending another single day doing that same 20-minute task Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. I'd rather gouge my eyes out. And so I would write scripts in order to automate those things I hated doing because personally, I hate monotony. Some people enjoy the sort of repetition and rhythm, but this is a whole work smarter, not harder. I'm one of those people who's just capable enough, just not quite lazy enough to find a efficient way to do something so I can get back to doing what I actually want to do.
Definitely. So yeah, we've seen automation and like AI agents kind of becoming a prevalent topic,
Yeah.
in the past little while. But how do you envision balancing AI automation with human expertise to kind of ensure the best outcomes in our work and collaboration?
Yeah. Um, I mean, again, there's still the human element of talking earlier about what kind of jobs are going to be created, like AI engineers. in sort of helping to come up with those types of things, or productivity engineers and such. But it's still going to be a matter of the human still needs to be involved to make sure that the output's accurate. It runs on a regular basis. And because technology isn't always going to 100% get it right 100% of the time. In my personal experience, it happens, frequently that it gets it 95% right, and you just got to catch out that little 5%. So, the humans are going to be there for the foreseeable future. I see it more being an opportunity, especially for smaller organizations or smaller teams, to do more with less. So, I am not an advocate for customers or companies, buying a bunch of Copilot licenses, getting all this productivity savings, and then reduce headcount by 20%, because that's not really the right way to think about it. It should be enabling you to do more with less, and you can recoup that time to then, identify, new thinkers in the organization, and these different initiatives you can now spend this time on, because the death of a corporation is a lack of innovation. I mean, take a look at BlackBerry, take a look at Kodak, take a look at Chapters in Indigo, because they were like, Amazon selling books online, that's never going to last. And so they lost out on that sort of thing because, again, lack of innovation, lack of vision. So you won't necessarily, hopefully, be reducing headcount by adopting AI, but you'll be able to take those things and then free up that sort of mental capacity and brain power for people to, maybe you run competitions for you to identify innovative ideas from out in the field. And next thing you know, you've got all these kinds of outside perspectives above and beyond what the typical executive community at that organization thinks of. So there's lots of ways to use AI for good, versus just as like a cost cutting, cost saving measure.
To kind of summarize what your thoughts on just the balance that needs to exist between human activity and trying to, support that through AI. Um, how should organizations and professionals approach the integration of AI into their workflows? Is it something that should be, like you said, you've touched on this briefly, but should it be something that's fully embraced, partially embraced, or maybe more so kept on the periphery?
Um, I mean, it really depends. AI may not be the best solution for all use cases. There might be some scenarios where you need absolute 100% precision with no variances for error. And that's when, more traditional tools maybe might be what you're looking for. Or, more like more of a scripted or coding based approach as opposed to an AI based approach. And the AI can help summarize the result, perhaps, but maybe not necessarily the complex calculations. So it really depends, and really mostly depends on the human. Because yeah, there are some people. I do a lot of executive training, and there are a lot of executives who they pay attention to the training, and they sort of play along at home, and they're trying things out as we're going through the training. And then there are other executives who show up and they're like, I've been using Chat GPT for a year. I've been, playing around with it. I got Copilot to do this, and I got it to do this, and I got it to do that, and, brought in this context from here, and it helped me do this. And like, they're already like diving straight in, like face first, in order to sort of see how they can personally get more out of it, and or maybe even their team. So I don't know if I really have a straight answer for it, because it's a really big consulting. It depends on the person, on the industry, on the job, on the workflow, on the process. Um, yeah, really big. It depends.
No, that makes sense. But from your perspective and in your role, how do you kind of measure the success of AI integration and AI powered tools like Copilot in enhancing productivity for professionals?
So there's the like straight and easy, well, easy-ish in a way, how many minutes or hours did I save? And so, for example, we do have a dashboard that customers can use to see, we sort of have like a rough calculation of every time somebody summarizes an email, they save 5 minutes. Every time somebody, summarizes a meeting that they didn't have to attend, if it was a 1 hour meeting, they technically now saved an hour because they didn't have to sit through that 1 hour meeting that should have just been an email. So there are those types of things where, there's sort of just like rough estimates of how much time is saved based on the actions the user took, which, you can then extrapolate out to what's their dollar per hour, how many hours have been saved per week, per month, per year, and you can kind of figure out like based on the monthly cost of that license for that user or for that role type, which could be 500 users in that department, you can kind of figure out, okay, it was this amount per month per user, and we saved an average of this many of hours per person multiplied by the average hourly wage. We saved this much money, which is 200% ROI or 5%, 500% ROI, or maybe it's like 15% ROI. So it really ultimately depends. But the other part of it is some of the things that dashboards can't really track, such as, for example, a customer told a story where they were able to save $30,000 because using AI to help them interpret two different contracts from a vendor. One vendor was a $50,000 contract and one was an $80,000 contract. They were able to determine that the $50,000 contract ticked all the boxes that they needed, and so they didn't need to select the $80,000 contract. So, how do you put that on a dashboard? You can't. So, those kinds of things is really down to user stories, and that's really where when especially in organizations when it comes to adopting AI, the idea of like a co-pilot community or center of excellence or community of practice or whatever you want to call it, where users can get information, but also users can share those success stories because those are the ones that are less tangible. Or the person who was able to finish the task that they were doing 2 hours early, so they were able to go to their child's dance recital, or they were able to they were on the brink of a meltdown, and AI was able to help them save enough time to the point where they finally felt like they weren't constantly drowning under a massive pile of work. So those pieces are a lot less easy to track versus just the raw productivity metrics, or, you know, were you able to increase your close rate of for your sales team so that they were able to close more deals when they use Copilot versus when they're not using Copilot? And you can track that versus, how many average deals did that person close before Copilot versus how many did they afterwards, and what's that dollar value. So there's the tangible components and there's the intangible components, which are much more difficult to measure and really down to perception and communication, and why we encourage customers to cultivate that community so that you can identify those success stories and share those, and sort of include that in your calculation, so to speak, of the value of Copilot to your organization.
Great answer. I'd like to close on this because we're running short on time, but for any students or professionals who are currently watching, what advice would you give them, given your experience, to effectively use Copilot, other AI tools in their everyday lives?
Try it. Be curious. You're not going to break anything if you ask Copilot to summarize a paper for you. And you're not going to cause a ruckus if you ask Copilot in Edge to summarize a web page for you. I mean, play around with it, give it a try, especially in scenarios where I'm pretty sure the University of Calgary, you all have ucalgary.ca email addresses. So everybody here should have access to Microsoft Copilot for free without the limitations of the free version, which is available with personal accounts. So try it. Rather than going to Google, just type your question in. And really, when it comes to prompting, don't overthink it too much. I like to think of it as if you were assigned an intern and they didn't really know what you do, or they don't really know your industry or your job, or they don't really like know how your brain thinks, or they don't really know like how you're thinking about stuff. How would you ask that other human to do something, whether it's find information for you or create content or analyze something, and how do you want it to come back to you, in the response? So Copilot has actually taught me how many assumptions I make in my communication, because it'll respond and I'll realize, oh, it didn't, include this, or it responded this way because I didn't tell it I wanted it to do this or that. So when working with people to sort of help them better understand how to use Copilot and other generative AI tools, think of how would you ask another human being this question to do, to get this result. So stay curious, give it a try. It's not going to break anything. It's not going to replace you. You might not even have a very good experience the very first time because maybe you just not very good at prompting, and it's like going to Google and just typing in a couple words in a search and getting terrible search results. It's the same sort of thing. Eventually, with time, you'll learn how to best use it, you'll get better at it, and you'll get even more out of it. and it'll become as ubiquitous as if you want to know something or you're having an argument over family dinner, rather than going to Google and asking the question, you'll instead go to an AI tool, hopefully Copilot, because I literally did that over Christmas, over my holiday break, where I settled a family debate by asking Copilot the question, and it gave me the information, and we were all back to enjoying our dinner and drinks. So, yeah, I mean, stay curious, give it a try. You're not going to cause any problems by trying it out, and you might learn a thing or two, and you might learn that you actually like it and you actually get some value out of it.
Great. That's some great advice. Um, Mrs. Bryant, thank you very much once again for all your time and your insights into AI. It was lovely hearing from you. On behalf of Zil, a big thank you. So that kind of concludes our interview. So I guess we can kind of wrap it up. Thank you to the viewers for watching. And yeah.